I still remember the exact sound of his laugh. That short, sharp burst that always managed to cut deeper than words ever could. It wasn't just laughter. It was dismissal. It was the sound of someone saying, "You'll never make it." My brother Ryan was the golden child, 2 years older. Always confident. Always loud enough to fill the room. He didn't even need to try. People liked him. Teachers loved him. My parents beamed when he spoke. And me? I was the quiet one. The one who stayed up late sketching business ideas on napkins while he went out with friends. Growing up, we were close, in that uneven kind of way where one person always stands in the sun, and the other learns to survive in the shadow. Ryan used to say, "You overthink everything, Emily. You're not cut out for the big world. Just play it safe." I'd smile, pretend it didn't sting. But inside it built up, layer after layer of quiet determination. When I told my family I wanted to start something of my own, a small consulting agency, just me and a laptop, Ryan laughed so hard he nearly choked on his coffee. "Consulting? What are you going to consult about, Em? How to dream too small." Even Dad chuckled. "He's teasing," he said. But he wasn't. It wasn't just teasing. It was a dismissal of who I was. And the worst part? I believed them. For a while, so I did what everyone said was safer. I took the stable job, the unremarkable role in an endless cubicle line. The fluorescent lights made everyone look tired, and the walls smelled like cheap coffee and resignation. Ryan, meanwhile, joined a flashy startup, posting photos of himself in suits that didn't quite fit, grinning beside rented sports cars at networking events. He was doing big things, apparently, and every family dinner was a reminder that I wasn't. He'd lean back, tap the side of his glass, and say things like, "Em, you know what your problem is? You're too careful. Life's about risk. You can't make money thinking like an employee." Then he'd grin, that smug grin, the one that always made me want to shrink. But the thing about being underestimated is, you start to learn how to listen, you start to observe what others miss, and you file it away. One night, after another argument about my safe little job, I snapped. Not out loud, but inside. That's the night I promised myself, I'll never explain my dreams again. I'll show him. Years passed quietly. I didn't rush. While Ryan bounced from one startup to another, chasing investors and hashtags, I learned. I studied my bosses, how they made decisions, how they failed. I watched the mistakes people repeated out of pride. And I saved. Every single month. Sometimes when things got hard, I'd hear Ryan's voice in my head. "You're too soft for the corporate world. You don't have the edge." And every time I'd push harder. Funny thing, the people who mock you the most are often the ones too afraid to try what you're doing. By 32, I had a plan. Not a dream, a plan. I left my job quietly without announcement. No social media post, no goodbye cake. I rented a tiny workspace above a coffee shop, bought secondhand furniture, and built my first client pitch deck from scratch. I was terrified. But for the first time, it was my fear. Mine to manage, mine to overcome. When I told Ryan, he smirked. "Consulting again? You never give up on your little fantasies, do you?" He laughed. "Good luck, boss lady. I'll hire you when my company makes it big." I smiled. "You'll need to survive long enough for that to happen." He didn't get it. He never did. That night, I stayed at the office until dawn. It wasn't glamorous. I ate instant noodles and built a website that barely loaded. But when I clicked publish, it felt like reclaiming a piece of myself he'd taken years ago. The first few months were brutal, silence after pitches. Rejections that sounded polite but felt personal. There were nights I'd cry quietly at my desk, staring at my reflection in the dark window, asking if Ryan had been right, but every no sharpened me. Every failure taught me where to adjust, when to listen, when to walk away. And slowly, the yes started coming. By the end of that first year, I had 3 steady clients. By the second, I had a team. And by the third, I had something Ryan never had: respect. Not fame, not followers. Real respect from people who trusted me because I'd earned it. The irony? I didn't even realize Ryan had lost everything until Mom called one evening. "Your brother's company folded," she said quietly. "He's going through a rough patch." I didn't say much, just nodded while a quiet, dangerous calm settled over me. All those years, he'd been laughing while standing on borrowed ground, and now the earth had given way beneath him. When I closed the call, I sat there for a long time. A strange mix of sadness and satisfaction tangled inside me. He was still my brother, but for the first time, I wasn't the one behind him anymore. And deep down I had a feeling this story between us wasn't over. Not yet. When you spend most of your life being told you're second best, it's strange when the scales start to shift. You don't even notice it at first. People start returning your calls faster, introducing you as the one who runs her own firm. Your name starts showing up in circles that used to feel way out of reach. And then one day your brother, the one who used to mock you at every turn, calls to catch up. That's how it began again with Ryan. He called me one late afternoon, out of nowhere. I was between meetings, sipping cold coffee that had long stopped tasting like anything, when my phone buzzed. "Ryan," the screen read. For a second, I considered letting it ring out, but curiosity's a strange thing, so I answered. "Hey, stranger," he said, his voice lighter than it used to be, but stretched, like someone trying to sound fine. "Hey," I replied. "It's been a while." There was an awkward pause. He cleared his throat. "Yeah, I heard your business is doing well." I smiled to myself. "It's keeping me busy." He laughed weakly. "That's good. Busy's good." Another pause. Longer this time. Then he said it. "I could use some advice." There it was. The unthinkable sentence. The one I'd replayed in my head 100 times but never expected to hear. Advice. From me. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. I just said, "Sure. What's going on?" He hesitated, then sighed. "My startup tanked. Investors pulled out. I'm looking for something new. Maybe consulting. Like you. Like me." The words hung in the air, heavy with irony. I nodded slowly, even though he couldn't see it. "Consulting's not bad. But it's work. Lots of it." "Yeah, I figured," he muttered. "Maybe you could. I don't know. Point me in the right direction." If he could have seen my face at that moment, the quiet, steady look I gave my desk, he'd have known the tables had turned. "Sure," I said softly. "Let's grab coffee next week." That week, I barely thought about it. I had clients, staff, deadlines. My world moved fast now, and Ryan was no longer its center. When we met, he looked smaller. Not physically. He still had that tall, confident build, but something in his posture had cracked. His shirt was wrinkled. His hair a little unkempt. The shine he used to have, the one he wore like armor, was gone. He smiled when he saw me. "You look good," he said, trying to sound casual. "Thanks," I said, sipping my latte. "You too." We both knew it was a lie. He got right to it. "So what's the trick, Em? You always said you were figuring things out. Now you're running this company that everyone's talking about. How do you do it?" I almost laughed. Because the truth was, there was no trick. Just hard work. Just being underestimated long enough to learn how to move in silence. "Patience," I said simply. "And knowing when to stop asking for approval." He nodded, pretending to understand. But I could tell he didn't. Not yet. After that, we started seeing each other more often. At tea first, it was weirdly nice. Like we were trying to rebuild something we'd both burned down years ago. He'd text sometimes. "Congrats on that new contract." Or proud of you, sis. And for a moment I believed maybe things had changed. But then little things started creeping in. The comments, the subtle jabs. Must be nice having all that free time now that you've got staff doing the hard work, he joked. Or, consulting's great, until the market crashes, right? He couldn't help himself. The envy was still there. One evening, we ended up at a dinner with mutual friends, people from our old neighborhood. Ryan had too much to drink. He started telling stories, exaggerated ones, about how he helped me when I was starting out, how I used his old contacts, how he always knew I'd figure it out eventually. Everyone laughed, nodding politely. I smiled too. That kind of smile you give when you're calculating just how much rope to let someone have before they hang themselves. And then he said it. She's doing amazing now. Makes me proud. I mean, if I hadn't pushed her so hard, who knows, right? That was it. That single sentence, that smug, performative ownership of my entire journey, snapped something quiet inside me. I didn't say a word. Just raised my glass, locked eyes with him, and said, "You're right, Ryan. If you hadn't spent years reminding me what failure looks like, I'd never have learned how to avoid it." The table went silent. Someone laughed nervously. Ryan looked like I'd slapped him, but he tried to play it off with a weak chuckle. And me? I felt calm. Not angry. Not even satisfied. Just done. After that night, things cooled between us again. He stopped calling. And I didn't chase. But a few months later, the world decided to hand me a plot twist I never saw coming. My company had just landed a major contract, one that would double our revenue and expand into new markets. I needed new hires. I told HR to start scouting resumes for mid-level project managers, people with decent experience and adaptability. The shortlist came in a week later. I skimmed through names and backgrounds. And then I froze. There it was. Ryan Bennett. For a full minute I just stared. The resume was professional, almost too polished. He'd listed his past startup roles with impressive titles, padded his achievements, exaggerated outcomes. But I saw right through it, because beneath the glossy formatting I saw what it really said. He needed this. He needed me. That night I sat alone in my office, staring at his name on the screen, thinking about every snide remark, every time he'd rolled his eyes, every time he'd made me feel small. And then I thought about the girl I used to be, the one he used to mock. Would she hire him? No, she'd interview him first. I stared at his name on that resume for a long time that night. It was surreal, like the universe had decided to fold time in on itself just to give me a front row seat to the irony of it all. Ryan Bennett. Applicant for project manager. The same brother who'd once laughed when I said I wanted to run my own firm. The same brother who told me, "You'll get eaten alive in the real world." And now he was asking for a seat at my table. I didn't sleep much that night. I wasn't angry, just quietly buzzing with a strange electricity, the kind that comes from realizing you finally have the upper hand, but you're not sure how sharp to play it. The next morning I called HR. "Hey, about that candidate list," I said. "The one with Ryan Bennett?" "Yeah," my HR lead replied. "Solid background, though there are a few gaps. We were planning to set up an interview next week." I paused, pretending to scroll through something. "Actually, schedule him for Friday. I'll take that one personally." There was a pause on the other end. "You?" "Yeah," I said lightly. "Old acquaintance. I'd like to handle it myself." Friday came faster than I expected. I remember sitting at my desk, smoothing the corners of his printed resume, taking slow breaths while my reflection stared back from the dark window glass. Was this petty? Maybe. But it wasn't cruel. I wasn't going to humiliate him. I just wanted him to feel, for a few minutes, what I'd felt for years, that quiet uncertainty, that little flicker of doubt. When he walked into the conference room, I almost didn't recognize him. Ryan used to be immaculate, perfect shirt, sharp hair, confident grin that filled any space he entered. Now he looked worn. Not destroyed, just frayed around the edges. His eyes darted nervously. His smile tried to play catch-up with his words. "Emily," he said with that same old forced casual tone. "Wow, long time." I stood up, keeping my professional face. "Mr. Bennett," I said, extending a hand. He blinked, hesitated, then smiled. "Right, formalities. Got it." We sat down. The air felt thick but polite. "So," I began, glancing at the resume. "Walk me through your experience since your startup." He chuckled nervously. "Yeah, that was rough. We had investors, good product, but bad timing. Market shifted." He was trying hard to sound confident, but I could hear it, the insecurity between sentences. He continued, explaining consulting gigs, side projects, and how he was now looking to get back into something stable. "Something stable," I repeated softly. "That must feel strange for you." He looked at me, eyebrows slightly furrowed. "What do you mean?" I smiled faintly. "You used to say people who settle for stable jobs lack ambition." He froze for a second, then smiled awkwardly. "Yeah, well, life changes perspective." "Does it?" I asked, leaning forward slightly, because I remember those words very clearly, especially when you said them at Mom's birthday, in front of everyone. He opened his mouth, closed it again. The silence stretched. Then he gave a small, embarrassed laugh. "I was a jerk back then." "Back then?" I asked softly, tilting my head. His smile faltered. "Okay, maybe longer than back then." I flipped through his resume again, slowly, methodically. "I'll be honest, Ryan," I said. "You've got gaps in your experience. You've jumped around a lot. If this were anyone else, I might think twice." He exhaled, shoulders dropping slightly. "Yeah, I get it. I know it's not a great look. But I'm willing to learn, take direction, start over if I have to." Those words, take direction, echoed in my head. Once upon a time, he would have laughed at the very idea of me giving direction. Now here he was asking for it. I nodded slowly. "I appreciate that." He smiled, relieved. "So, you think I've got a shot?" I tapped the table lightly. "It's not just my call. HR and the executive panel have their say too. But I'll put in a note." He leaned back, visibly relaxing. "Thanks, Em. Really. I mean it. You didn't have to even talk to me." I met his eyes, calm, steady, unreadable. "I did," I said quietly. "You deserve the same chance everyone else gets." After he left, I sat there for a long time. My hands were steady, but my chest was full of noise. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about witnessing, finally seeing him as he really was, not as the cruel brother who mocked my ambition, but as a man who'd finally been humbled by his own arrogance. That was enough. But the story didn't end there. A week later, HR came back with their evaluations. "He's qualified," my HR lead said. "Rough around the edges but adaptable. You still want to sign off?" I looked at the report, then at the glass wall where my reflection stared back, older, sharper, calmer than before. "Yes," I said. "Hire him." There was a pause. "Under you." I smiled faintly. "Under me." The first day he walked into the office as my employee, I felt something shift in the air. People greeted him politely, unaware of our shared history. He tried to act normal, friendly, confident, but there was a nervousness to his laughter, a stiffness in his words when he talked to me. He called me boss once, jokingly, but it didn't sound like a joke, and that was when I realized revenge didn't always have to roar. Sometimes it could whisper, and that whisper could echo louder than any scream. Every week I gave him projects, real ones, challenging but fair. He worked hard. I'll give him that. But he was out of his depth. There were moments where I could have embarrassed him, called out mistakes in meetings, highlighted poor decisions. But I didn't. Instead, I let him present. Let him stumble a little. And when people turned to me for comment, I'd say, "We're still finding the right direction." He knew what I was doing. And somehow that was worse than public humiliation, because every silence, every polite nod, every patient correction was a reminder that the person he used to belittle had outgrown the need to strike back. One afternoon, he knocked on my door. "Got a minute?" "Sure," I said, looking up from my laptop. He stepped inside, awkward. I just wanted to say thanks for giving me this chance. I know I didn't make it easy for you before." I didn't say anything. He exhaled, shifting uncomfortably. "I said a lot of stupid things. I was jealous. You made something of yourself." "I didn't." I looked at him, really looked at him. Not as my brother, not as my employee, but as someone who finally saw me clearly. "Ryan," I said quietly, "you don't owe me an apology. You owe yourself growth." He nodded, eyes glassy. "Still thanks." He left the room, closing the door behind him. And I sat there, heart heavy but calm. Revenge had been the hook, the fantasy I'd carried for years, but closure that came from realizing I no longer needed to win, because somewhere along the line I already had. It's strange, really. You think revenge will feel like a storm, thunder, lightning, chaos. But when it finally comes, it's more like rain, soft, steady, cleansing. The first few months with Ryan on my team were awkward, a fragile kind of normal. We exchanged polite small talk. I assigned him work like I would any other employee. And in meetings, I addressed him as Ryan, not my brother. It wasn't about pretending. It was about keeping the balance, the line between who we were then and who we were now. But every so often I caught flashes of his old self. That impatient tone. That hint of arrogance when he spoke too quickly, trying to prove he still belonged in a room like this. He wanted to show he was still Ryan, the confident one. But under that shell I saw the flicker of insecurity he couldn't hide anymore. And that was when I realized something almost funny. I didn't have to do anything to make him feel small. Life had already done that for me. We had a client presentation one afternoon. Big deal, high stakes. The kind of project that could make or break a quarter. Ryan volunteered to lead the pitch. He wanted to show initiative, I could tell. And I let him. "Go for it," I said. "But make sure you know the numbers. The client is detail-oriented." He nodded, full of confidence. "Don't worry, I've got it." During the meeting, he started strong. Smooth delivery, engaging voice. But then came the cue, and if the client asked about the financial projections, a section Ryan had barely touched, he fumbled. His hands trembled as he scrolled through slides, buying time with filler words. I could have stepped in, saved him. But I didn't. Instead, I sat there calm, composed, and when he finally looked to me for help, I gave a small professional nod. Then I took over, answering the client's questions clearly, precisely. When the meeting ended, the client shook my hand first. Ryan kept a tight smile, his face pale. On the walk back, he said softly, "I blew that one." I shrugged gently. "You'll do better next time." No anger. No mockery. Just silence that said more than words ever could. That silence followed us for weeks. But here's the thing, despite the humiliation, Ryan didn't quit. He stayed. He learned. He came in early, started asking for feedback, started listening, really listening. And I noticed something shifting in him. The edge dulled. The bravado faded. He began to carry himself differently. Not as someone trying to prove he was right, but as someone finally ready to learn. Sometimes I'd watch him from my office. The way he'd quietly help new team members, the way he'd pause before speaking now at IT was humbling to see. Not just for him, but for me too, because for the first time in years I didn't see the brother who mocked me. I saw the man who finally understood me. One evening, after most people had gone home, I was still at my desk finishing up reports. The office was quiet, city lights flickering through the windows. Ryan knocked lightly and stepped inside. "You're still here?" he asked. I smiled faintly. "Old habits." He chuckled, sitting across from me. "I used to laugh at that, you know," he said. "How you'd always overwork. Stay late. Chase perfection." "Yeah," I said softly. "I remember." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I get it now. It's not about perfection. It's about survival, isn't it? About proving you can do it, even when nobody believes you can." That caught me off guard. Because for the first time he wasn't defending himself, he was seeing me. "Yeah," I said quietly. "It is." There was a long silence between us, the kind that doesn't need words. Then he said something that stuck with me. "You were right. About everything. I thought being loud made me strong. I thought mocking you made me smarter. But you were always the one with real strength." My throat tightened, but I stayed composed. "Ryan," I said, "you don't owe me an apology." He shook his head. "Yeah, I do. I treated you like competition when I should have treated you like family." That was the moment something inside me finally let go. All those years of resentment, of waiting for karma, they dissolved into something else, peace. After that, things got easier between us. He started thriving again, not in the same arrogant way but with quiet determination. And when he succeeded, I didn't feel bitter. I felt proud. One day, after closing a huge deal together, he stopped at my office door and said, "I think Mom would have liked seeing this." I smiled. "Yeah, I think so too." But the real full circle moment came a few months later. Our company was expanding. New offices, new leadership positions. HR sent me the list of internal promotions to review, and there it was again. Ryan Bennett recommended for senior account manager. The old me would have hesitated. The petty part of me, the one that had waited years for this balance, whispered, "Don't give it to him." But the woman I'd become, she just smiled. I signed the approval. Later that week, he came to my office, a mixture of surprise and gratitude in his eyes. "You didn't have to," he said softly. "I know," I replied. "But I wanted to." He looked at me, and for the first time since we were kids, I saw something honest in his face. No pride, no mask. Just brotherly respect. "Thanks, Em," he said. "Don't thank me," I said with a small grin. "Just don't make me regret it." That night, as I turned off the office lights, I caught my reflection again in the window, and I smiled, because revenge hadn't come through payback. It had come through growth. Not just his, but mine too. That he had mocked me once for daring to dream, and now he worked beside me because I never stopped. That was enough. Years have passed since that chapter in my life began. The one where my brother worked under me and karma, it seemed, decided to balance its own scales. Funny thing about revenge, when you're young you imagine it as a grand finale, a confrontation, an explosion, a perfect ending. But in real life it doesn't come with fanfare. It seeps in quietly, like light through a cracked window, and when it finally settles, what's left isn't satisfaction. It's understanding. That I remember one particular morning I was sitting in my office, reviewing quarterly reports, coffee growing cold beside me. Ryan came by, dropped a stack of files on my desk and said, "Just wanted to let you know the client renewed for another year." I smiled. "Nice work." He grinned, that familiar spark of pride flickering again, but this time softer, grounded. After he left, I stared at the door for a while. That same door I used to dread seeing him walk through when we were kids, because it usually meant teasing or criticism, or a reminder that I was trying too hard. Now that same door marked a different kind of story. A story about two people who finally grew up. You see, what Ryan and I went through, it wasn't just sibling rivalry. It was years of unspoken hurt, of being compared, of both of us trying to prove something to parents who were long gone and couldn't see what we became. He needed to win, I needed to survive. Neither of us realized that we were fighting the same invisible enemy, the fear of not being enough. That realization hit me one evening as I drove home after a long day. The sunset was melting into the city skyline, and the radio played a song we used to hum in our parents' car when we were little. And suddenly, I wasn't thinking about the boardroom or projects or even revenge. I was thinking about the two kids in the back seat, arguing over who got the last slice of pizza. The boy who always needed to be right. The girl who just wanted to be seen. And I couldn't help but laugh softly to myself, because somehow, through all the years, we'd become those same people, only older with fancier problems and better clothes. A few months later, I got promoted again. VP of Client Relations. A title I once dreamed about, now just another line on a resume. During the announcement meeting, Ryan was the first to clap. Loudly. Genuinely. Afterward, he stopped by my office. VP, he said with a grin. Guess I can't make fun of you for being a workaholic anymore. Guess not, I said, smiling back. Then he added, You earned it, Em. Every bit of it. That meant more than he probably realized, because there it was, the thing I'd wanted from him all along. Not his apology, not his failure. Just acknowledgement. A few weeks later, we had lunch together for the first time outside of work in years. Just the two of us. No titles, no tension. We sat at a little restaurant near the office. He talked about his daughter's school play. I told him about a new project I was mentoring. And somewhere between the coffee and dessert, he said, You know, if you ever need a partner for one of your big deals, I'm around. I laughed. You offering to work with me now? He shrugged with a grin. Stranger things have happened. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in my adult life, I saw not my rival, not my tormentor, but my brother. Later that evening, as I walked home, I realized something simple yet profound. Revenge isn't the opposite of forgiveness. It's a step on the way to it. Because before you can forgive someone, truly forgive them, you have to see the whole story. The hurt, the flaws, the reasons, and sometimes, that takes years. In the end, my revenge wasn't the day I hired him. It wasn't the presentation he stumbled through. It wasn't even when he apologized. It was every single day that I walked into that office, confident, capable, calm. Everything he once said I'd never be. And knowing I didn't need to destroy him to prove it. All I had to do was become who I was meant to be. When I think back now about the laughter, the tension, the years of silence, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel gratitude. Because Ryan's doubt became my drive. His words built my walls and later, my foundation. And when the time came, life brought us back together, not to settle old scores, but to show us that growing apart was the only way we could ever grow up. So, if you ask me what this story really is, it's not about karma or comeuppance or poetic justice. It's about closure. The kind that doesn't come from seeing someone fall, but from realizing you no longer need them to, because sometimes, the sweetest revenge is peace. Subscribe for more tales of revenge.